So if Trump wants to be a gangster and bully and said, I'm going to take your money if you win, doesn't he realize that when people straighten their backs up and have a spine and respond to his bully activity?
On CNN, Anna Kasparian and Dr. Cornel West face a familiar dynamic, serious voices against a movement using intimidation as politics. The topic isn't just a mayoral race. It's Trump threatening retaliation against voters and cities that don't comply. This isn't policy debate. It's democracy on trial. Kasparian's clarity and West's moral conviction remind us, strength in democracy comes from spine, not fear. If you support progress and inclusion, hit subscribe and join the fight for democracy online.
Tonight, Zoran Mamdani fires back at President Trump's threats to New York City funding. Over the weekend, Trump said Mamdani's campaign to be mayor will prove to be, quote, one of the best things to ever happen to our great Republican Party. He added that Mamdani, quote, needs the money from me as president in order to fulfill all of his fake communist promises. He won't be getting any of it, so what's the point of voting for him? Well, CNN's Aaron Burnett spoke to Mamdani about that threat tonight. Here's what he said.
So the number this year from the federal government was $7.4 billion to New York City. Are you okay if New York City loses that?
No, we will fight for every single dollar that the city currently receives from the federal government. And I look for examples across this country that showcase the best way to respond to Donald Trump's strengths is not collaboration, is his threats rather. It's responding with strength. And what we see in California is an attorney general of the state has estimated that for every dollar they spent on lawsuits against the federal government's threats to withhold funding, they won more than $30,000 in what would otherwise have been lost. And so we will take that same approach.
The paradox, of course, of Trump's post and also of his behavior in this whole situation is that he says this is so good for Republicans, and yet he seems to be willing to do almost anything to get Mamdani out of this race. It's too late now, more than likely, but why? Why is he playing both sides of this?
Abby, I think you're going to see more fireworks. I mean, Trump has a lot going for him in this particular case, just as Republicans have pointed to other Democrat politicians in the past and try to make them individuals that they identify with certain brands of the Democrat Party. And in this case, Mamdani has identified himself as a democratic socialist, or as conservatives would say, a communist. And so why wouldn't they play up some of the policy proposals and the cost of those and what it would mean in terms of the implications for the residents of New York City were he to be elected? And yes, you're going to see
more.
But
on what basis would Trump withhold $7.4 billion from New York?
Well, we know Congress controls the purse strings, so there's a lot that, that he would have to do.
He's going to really say, New Yorkers, you exercised your right to vote. We're going to take your tax dollars away from you.
Except New Yorkers spent almost 18% of GDP on federal taxes. I'm talking about New York City taxpayers, 18% of their GDP last year on paying federal taxes. The idea that the president is going to retaliate against local leaders just because he doesn't like their politics and withhold money that they're entitled to is ridiculous to me. And honestly, it sets up a really, really bad precedent. I would be disgusted if Biden did something like that. It disgusts me that Trump is threatening to do it just because he doesn't like Mamdani, doesn't like his politics, and wants to go against the will of voters in New York City.
Well, there's 2 points, if I can, that I want to make here. One is New York is the beating heart of the Democratic Party right now. One, you have a socialist, self-described socialist, that is not a pejorative, he says it himself, who's running for mayor of New York City. And you have Chuck Schumer, who is driving us towards a government shutdown because he's worried about a primary challenge from AOC. It is incredibly New York-centric, and it's the battle taking place in the Democratic Party.
True.
The second point is the former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels. I was at this event back in 2009 in my home county, Lake County, Indiana, which has had a troubled past. It's where Gary is located. But people were complaining about all the corruption and the grift that was happening there and asking him for help. And he said, quote, I believe in home rule, and you're entitled to all the lousy, clumsy, graft-ridden government you're willing to pay for.
Listen very carefully. This is the moment where the mask of power slips and the true mechanics of governance are revealed. Pete Seat wants you to believe that New York City is merely the stronghold of the Democratic Party, as if political identity can be reduced to a map, a voting pattern, or a single election cycle. What he conveniently omits is that the man threatening that city from the White House is a New Yorker himself. Geography does not confer immunity from accountability. It only magnifies responsibility. This is not just a local debate about mayors or municipal budgets. This is a direct test of whether power respects institutions and citizens. If leadership treats taxpayers as tools or pawns, democracy itself is on trial, and the consequences are immediate. Anna Kasparian does more than comment. She diagnoses the structural crisis at hand. Federal aid is not a gift, it is a right. Every dollar New Yorkers, Angelenos, Chicagoans, San Franciscans, Portlanders pay into the system belongs to the people who earned it. And yet Trump and his allies want to turn those hard-earned funds into instruments of intimidation. Punish the cities that vote differently. Reward the ones that show obedience. This is not governance. This is coercion. This is a blueprint for what happens when public power is treated as private leverage. When threats replace policy, when fear replaces law, when loyalty replaces principle, the very foundation of self-government erodes. This is unprecedented in modern times. Presidents have overreached before, they have mismanaged budgets, they have bent rules. But we have never seen a leader openly threaten to withhold taxpayer resources as punishment for civic participation. This is not politics as usual. This is authoritarian strategy in motion. Citizens are no longer participants. They are objects to be manipulated. Their votes, their contributions, and their communities are treated as bargaining chips. Leadership that forgets the essential dignity of citizens is a threat to democracy itself. Then there is the weaponization of language. Socialist, communist, Marxist, fascist, woke. Words that once carried distinct meaning have been stripped of their content and repurposed as tools of manipulation. Claw Harris is called all four in the same breath, and the audience is expected to absorb it without question. Facts, history, and context no longer matter. When language loses meaning, truth loses power. When truth loses power, democracy falters. Citizens are left confused, afraid, or disillusioned, and in that void, authoritarian impulses thrive. Trump's tactic is clear. Compliance is rewarded, dissent punished. Fear becomes a tool, division becomes currency, and the rule of law is treated as optional. Voices like Kasparian and Cornel West are not just commentary. They are defenses of democracy, reminding us that courage, integrity, and clarity are essential. This is bigger than New York or a single election. Weaponized funds, twisted language, and citizens treated as pawns put the very principles of democracy to the test. History shows that when leaders act above obligation, social trust collapses, institutions weaken, and civic engagement suffers. The choice is urgent. Will we accept fear and coercion, or demand accountability, truth, and courage? Every citizen, every voter, every voice matters. Silence is complicity. Action preserves democracy. Spine ensures survival.
Right now,
Fair
you're
enough.
entitled to all the socialism you're willing to vote for.
Fair enough.
Well,
I
I'll
mean,
tell you
there's
this,
also
though,
a
man.
big
I'm glad
question.
that you even described the Democratic Party having a heart, because it seems to me they've been so spineless.
I'm feeling nice tonight. You know,
You're very, very kind.
Well, Dr.
But I would
West,
say
let me
this, though.
ask you this, because
Yes,
I mean,
yes, yes.
it's to you, perhaps to the point that you're going to make here. But the Democratic Party, it's a big question. What should they do with Mamdani? And in the New York Times, there was an argument that they should embrace the eat the rich populism, a scorching economic message delivered by political outsiders standing up to the powerful. The villains in this narrative are the elites at the top of the broken system. Do you think that that's right? The Democrats should just forget about the labels and just embrace the economic populism?
Oh, and it is a populism. It's not a socialism. Mamdani's not a socialist at all. This is New Deal liberalism, New Deal social democratic policies. And New York is not just the center of what you're saying to be the Democratic Party. It's the center of the national and international capitalist order. So if Trump wants to be a gangster and bully and said, I'm going to take your money if you win, doesn't he realize that when people straighten their backs up and have a spine and respond to his bully activity, if New York wanted to boycott the federal government as a city, the government would go down too. And there's an identity in New York that cuts across class. Brooklyn, boogie down Bronx, I live in Harlem. New York would be able to come together. So all this talk about socialism, that's just abstract so-and-so. Brother Zoran is a liberal, he's a social democrat, he's no revolutionary at all.
I actually agree with your take on that. And honestly, I think Mamdani represents the class-based politics that Trump pretended to be about and ran on both in 2016 and 2024.
And Brother Bernie
didn't deliver.
Ran on it too.
He did.
And many of us were with him, but
Exactly.
he was unable to succeed at that level. But thank God the brothers Zoran, Kwame, Mamdani doing his thing.
I'll give you this much. I do think he's tapped into the issues that particularly young people care about. I mean, they can't afford housing in this country because the price is so high and interest rates are, at historic levels, and all of these challenges that they're encountering as they enter the world. The problem is that the policies that he's pursuing are not going to make things any better for them. And we know this because we can look at 4 years of Joe Biden and the spending spree that the federal government went on and what that meant for the cost of living and inflation in this country.
I think Joe Biden and Mamdani are very different. Joe Biden was all about public-private partnerships. For instance, like the infrastructure bill, which, Democrats love to talk about, love that it happened, but it really privatizes a ton of public infrastructure. There's a lot of corporate giveaways in there. Mamdani comes from a different school of thought.
Listen carefully to what Dr. Cornel West is saying, because this is the heart of the lesson. Manny is not a radical socialist. He is a New Deal Democrat, standing for policies that have been proven over decades to create opportunity, fairness, and real change. These are policies that built the middle class, that lifted millions out of poverty, that made government work for people instead of elites. This is what voters are asking for. They are not looking for ideological purity tests or labels. They want leadership that addresses housing crises, healthcare access, education, and economic fairness. And yet, MAGA and its allies will throw every extreme label they can at anyone who challenges their power: socialist, communist, fascist, woke, without regard to truth or reality. Words have been stripped of meaning, reduced to a tool of fear and division. But labels do not change reality. Policies do. And this is where the Democratic Party must focus. Think about the irony and the opportunity here. For decades, conservatives have screamed socialist at every Democratic president, from Obama to Biden, often inaccurately. And yet, millions of Americans voted for them anyway because they demanded results. They demanded solutions. That's the lesson. Voters respond to action, not fear. If the Democratic Party reacts to smears rather than delivering tangible policies, it loses credibility and, ultimately, trust. If the party continues to rely solely on the idea that Trump is worse, without presenting a real vision for the people, it risks losing the very citizens it claims to defend. This is not just a political mistake. It is a moral failure. Democracy itself depends on leaders who act with vision, courage, and integrity, not just defensive rhetoric. And here is the generational dimension. Young voters don't care about labels. They care about whether they can afford a place to live, whether they can get an education, whether their health care is accessible, whether they have a future worth working for. They care about policies that improve lives, not slogans that divide. Dr. West and Anna Kasparian are pointing out the disconnect. The establishment, the Schumers, the Pelosi's, the career politicians, too often prioritizes optics, political maneuvering, or maintaining power over serving citizens. But the younger generation sees through that. They demand action, they demand heart, and they demand leaders who will actually do something, not just shout at the opposition. If Manny succeeds, it could signal something much larger than one mayoral victory. It could provide a blueprint for a Democratic Party that listens, that acts decisively, that leads with both heart and spine. One that empowers younger leaders, prioritizes policies over politics, and proves that government can truly serve its citizens. If the current establishment refuses to step aside or adapt, maybe it's time for new voices to take the lead. Because the future of the party, and of democracy itself, depends on it. The lesson for all of us is clear. Labels are meaningless if they replace action. Fear is useless if it replaces courage. Democracy requires spine, vision, and accountability. It requires leaders who understand that government exists to serve people, not elites, and that real progress is made by implementing ideas that improve lives, not by avoiding conflict or trying to appease every critic. Anything less risks more than just an election. It risks the trust of a generation, the credibility of institutions, and the hope of a nation. So here's the takeaway. The Democratic Party must have heart. It must have vision. It must act. And it must empower leaders who are willing to put policies first, labels second, and people above politics. If they fail to do that, they fail democracy itself. If they succeed, they provide a model for the country and for the world of what principled, courageous, and compassionate leadership looks like. I'm Chris on Culture. Let me know what you think. Do you side with Dr. West and Anna Kasparian, or do you believe the MAGA talking points hold weight? Every comment, every conversation, every voice matters. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.